Great.
Now you're on.
Okay. Fifth graders, thanks for being nice and quiet as I start with this. Okay. This is called The Way West. Thank you. You don't even need to start reading it right now. You're just listening to what I'm going to be telling you about. Okay? We are going to be determining what the main idea of the text is using text evidence. That's very important. Very, very important. We're also going to be explaining how that text evidence supports the main idea. And on Wednesday, we are going to be looking at primary sources and comparing primary sources, photographs, to the story. We're also going to be looking at a video clip and comparing the video clips to the story itself as well. So we're going to be using multimedia text to talk about the story. So, boys and girls, you each have the information, the story, The Way West, out in front of you. What's interesting is that this is a true story written by Amelia Stewart Knight, and you'll see that inside the front cover. And she lived in the 1850s. She and her husband, with their, I think, 8 kids, holy cow, they traveled from Iowa to Oregon, on the Oregon Trail. So this story is taken from her journal entries. So it's fascinating because we are going to pick up and determine today as readers what life was like in the 1850s. Okay? So we're going to start on the first page in the introduction. And actually, we are going to mark the text. So those of you in both classes, we are marking up the text, okay? So you've got a pencil in your hand. Would you follow along as I read the introduction? This is a true story of Amelia Stewart Knight, her husband and their 7 children who set out from Monroe County, Iowa for the Oregon Territory in 1853. The boys were named Jefferson, Seneca, Plutarch, and Chatfield. The girls were Lucy, Frances, and Elmira. The Knights started their journey in Iowa. Other families started in little towns along the Missouri River called jumping off places because the travelers were leaving the United States and setting out through Indian Territory. The overlanders traveled in big wagons pulled by yokes of 6 or 8 oxen. Mrs. Knight cooked with buffalo chips over dusty fires. She rolled her pie dough on the wagon seat. If a family took their cows and dogs with them, the animals had to walk beside the wagons for more than 1,000 miles. A big wagon heavy with supplies could travel only 10 or 15 miles a day. It might take 4 to 6 months for a family to reach the Pacific coast. Only a few places existed on the long road where they could stop for repairs or more food. When the oxen got tired or when the road got too tough. Rocking chairs, families, I just lost my place. When the oxen got tired or when the road got too rough, families lightened their loads by throwing away things they loved. Rocking chairs, cradles, and even a piano might be left at the side of the road. Wow. So when I look at this introduction, I know that's pretty amazing. It makes you think they're dropping things on the side of the road. But our job today is to determine what life was like in the 1850s as people traveled along the Oregon Trail. Okay? This introduction gives us information about the reader. We have used something called PI. I think, did you guys use this as a 4th grade class? No. Oh, PI is great. Is the author's purpose to persuade us about something? Is the author's purpose to inform us about something? Or is the author's purpose to entertain us about something? Easy as pie. Well, this journal will inform us about life in the 1850s. So she's not going to persuade us, she's going to inform us because it's her own personal journal entry. All right? The first page, the first paragraph is an introduction. So I'm going to write introduction on the side. It's an intro. We know who the characters are, what they're doing. The second paragraph gives us information about family life. And the third paragraph talks to us about the travel. So we are getting a glimpse before we even start reading her journal about what life was like. We know that there's a family here. We know where they're going. We know what's happening. They have their wagon with the oxen pulling it, and we know that they are traveling, and that sometimes it was very tough. Does that make sense to you? Okay. The next page, let's flip to that, is the rest of the introduction. And the introduction, when I look at that text, is by a Lillian Shishel. I'm not even sure if I'm saying that right. And she is a person who might have done the research about the journal. I'm not sure. So let's continue reading the introduction. So all eyes are on the text. There were many rivers to cross on the long journey, but the people were ingenious. They painted the sides of their wagons with tar to keep water out. When they lifted the wagon, then they lifted the wagon right off the flatbed and floated it across the river like a boat. They piled their belongings on the wagon bed and pushed that across the river like a raft. Indians helped the overlanders, warning them against quicksand and trading salmon, deer meat, and moccasins for cloth and money. When the overlanders came to the mountains, the work was different. The men pulled the wagons up to the mountaintops with winches and chains, and the women and children set rocks at the back wheels to keep the wagon from sliding back down. Once they got to the top, the men tied strong rope around the wagons and pulled hard to keep them from smashing on the way down the other side. Rain soaked through the canvas covers of the wagons, and people often became ill. Children were injured climbing on and off the moving wagons, and sometimes they got lost when they strayed. Mrs. Knight does not tell you until the very end that she is expecting another baby. You must remember her secret as you read. So Lillian Shishel, her purpose is to inform you about this journal and what is going to happen. So we will now start Saturday, April 9th. Now my purpose as a reader today is to discover what life was like in the 1850s using text evidence. So I'm going to go to a document here. And we'll copy this in our reading journals right now. So fifth graders, if you would write this in your journal, it's called The Way West.
We are going to screen share. I'm going to screen share this doc. And now everyone sees it.
Okay, if you will copy this in your journal, we're just putting the title of it, The Way West. And we're writing my inference about the main idea and text support. And if I could, I would draw a line straight. I would draw a line straight down the middle. Let's see if I can. Yes. Great. Because our purpose as a reader is to figure out what life was like in the Way West in the 1850s, going down the Oregon Trail. So we have that in front of us, and we'll all be able to access it. We're going to be talking about something called tone. And I'm going to put that up here at the top. The tone of the story. Tone means the feeling, the emotions that the author is trying to convey. Now, Mrs. Knight, you'll get a feeling about what life was like for her and her kids and her husband. And we're going to be pulling out text evidence to determine if this tone is happy, sad. I'm going to switch this. So tone is going to be something we're looking for. Are we good? Okay. So we're going to now start with her journal entry. And some of the words you'll find sound unusual. So I'm going to read the first page, and then we're going to get our text evidence, and we're going to start completing the chart. So if you'll follow along with me, it's on page 14. Saturday, April 9th, 1853. Started from home about 11 o'clock and traveled 8 miles and camped in an old house. Night cold and frosty. Monday, April 11th, 1853. Jefferson and Lucy have the mumps. Poor cattle bawled all night. Bawled, good point. Bawled. They cried. The poor cattle, they bawled all night. They were crying. They were mooing. They weren't very happy. They weren't very happy. No, Jefferson, good point. I have some questions asked in here. But let's not ask out loud. We'll go back to it in a minute. But we have a question about Jefferson and Lucy have the mumps, so we'll talk about that in a minute. Thursday, April 14th, 1853. 16 wagons all getting ready to cross the creek. Hurrah, boys, all ready. Get up, Tip and Tyler, and away we go, the sun just rising. Evening that same night. The men have pitched the tent and are hunting something to make a fire to get supper. Saturday, April 16th, 1853. Made our beds down in the tent in the wet and mud, bedclothes nearly spoiled. Cold and cloudy this morning and everybody out of humor. Seneca is half sick. Plurtok has broke his saddle girth. Husband is scolding and hurrying all hands. And Elmira says she wished she was home, and I say ditto, home sweet home. I'm going to pause it right here. I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with the text. My job as a reader is to determine what life was like in the 1850s along the Oregon Trail. I'm going to say, because they've just started out, I'm going to say that life is difficult. Now, what's tech support that will let me know that? What's a specific piece of text that I can go back to in this first section that I just read that's going to say life was hard? I look back into the entry. Oh, Saturday, April 16th, 1853, if you look there. Made our beds down in the tent in the wet and mud, bedclothes nearly spoiled, cold and cloudy this morning and everybody out of humor. I would say life is tough, and I'm going to use that text. I'm going to say page 14. I'm just thinking, I'm trying to enlarge it, but on the screen. Yeah. Should I just make the larger text?
You can zoom it in. Let's go 125.
Okay.
Like that?
Yep, that's better. Thank you. Life was hard. I'm taking her words exactly for the text. Made our beds in the wet and mud. Made our beds in the wet and it's great that you guys are copying this, and mud. And then she goes on to say, cold and cloudy, everybody out of humor. Cold and cloudy, everybody out of humor. Wow. I'm going to back this up a little bit. Out of humor, so they weren't in good spirits, were they? They're not in very good spirits. It's cold and cloudy. I'm assuming that the life is difficult. It's not what they've expected. So I made an inference. Life is difficult was my inference, but my text support was explain why. My text support explained why it was hard. Sure, I could do that too. But I'm just pointing as to why that text support backs up my statement. We always talk about staying within the four corners of the text. Husband is scolding. There's another text evidence. I'm going to put that in there too. Tab over. Same page. Husband is scolding. He's angry.
Why is he angry?
Well, if I go back to the text, husband is scolding. Well, Plurtok, one of the boys, broke his saddle girth. Something about the saddle, which saddle girth. If I look over at our saddle, I'm not sure if it's the pommel.
No, your girth.
What is the girth?
See where it hooks on the bottom and
Yes.
it rounds over?
Yes.
That's the girth.
Oh, we got an expert in here, Malia. Thank you. So it's the part that goes underneath the horse that keeps the saddle in place.
Yeah.
So if that is broken off, by golly, you can't ride. Oh, that's extremely important. So husband is scolding Plutarch, Plutarch, because the saddle girth is broken. So that means they have trouble riding, keeping that saddle on the horse, and the horses were extremely important. Elmira, one of the kids, wishes she were home, and the mom says, ditto, I do too. So that's all evidence to prove that life's hard. So that's 1, 2, 3, that's 3 pieces of text support to prove that life is difficult. Yes, Logan.
What about Seneca's?
Seneca is, I'm looking for that one again. Seneca is half sick. Oh, let's put that in there too. I think that would make me think that life is hard too if one of my kids is sick. Is there anybody in the other 2 classes that want to add anything for text support that life is difficult? I'm just pausing. I think we're good to continue. Okay. Let's continue with the second part of that page. So again, our purpose is to come up with our excuse me, our inferences about what life was like. So let's read the second half of that page. Ready to follow along? Okay, you can mark up your text. Thursday, April 21st, 1853. Rained all night, is still raining. I have just counted 17 wagons traveling along ahead of us in the mud and water. No feed for our poor stock to be got at any price. Have to feed them flour and meal. I'm going to let you now read in your triads because I think you understand what I'm doing. Is there anybody that needs me in the other 2 classes to continue with further explanation, or can I assign the next section for them to read and do the same thing?
I have a question.
Okay. Would you now, in your triads, read the rest of page 14, just the rest of that page, see what other facts, statements you can make with text evidence about life in the 1850s. Go ahead, please.
Why do they have to leave their home?
Because schools we learn about tomorrow, they want to find a better life out.
Now, because it's a lot of chat on your side, you can mute yourself until you're ready to come back on and stay. You're down here. It's always in a separate window, so there. And what you can do, you can stop presenting your page to everyone, and you can go mute yourself.
Okay, I'm with the other groups now. We're ready to continue. So, what did we notice? Would somebody from the other classes like to share from our text about how life was? Okay, I'm just checking here with the...
Should I?
Okay. We are just ready to share a final thought here. I know we got started later, and that's okay, but does somebody from the other classes want to share about life at the moment, or they just want to listen in here?
We have one, Mrs. Ulmer.
Okay, go for it.
There was no room for the kids to like stay in when there was a really bad storm.
Okay, so what would you like me to write on the text support?
No room in like covered like, wagons and tents for the kids when it was really, really bad.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys read that part. The kids don't ride in the covered wagons. They have to walk. Covered wagons for the kids. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I'd want to ride, I'd want to walk hundreds of miles. Anybody from the other class have anything else to prove? That definitely would say that life is hard. Anybody from my class? Trinity, what did you notice? Text support.
I noticed that when people were like really free,
Mm-hmm.
I knew that it says dreary times, wet and muddy and crowded in the tent, cold and wet and uncomfortable in the wagon. No place for poor children. So
Dreary times. Wet, muddy, crowded in the tent. Okay.
and then it says no place for poor children.
So, whoops, spelling error, sorry. So, readers, you're writing this down in your journal. Cold, wet, muddy, dreary times. Uncomfortable in the wagon. So we are building our text evidence about life is difficult. We don't see a reason to change the main idea yet, our inference yet. So we've got life is difficult, cold, muddy, wet in the wagon. We have the page. I can even add the date if I need to, which would be...
And Mrs. Ulmer, we've got an entry for Thursday, April 21st, 1853. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Right here.
It says no feed for our poor stock to be got at any price.
So again, that's more text support that says that life is difficult for them back then.
Okay, no feed for our poor oxen.
No feed for our poor stock to be got at any price. And Mrs. Ulmer, are we actually quoting from the text, or are we just pulling information from the text?
We're pulling information, and we can quote if necessary to prove our point even further, which is perfect.
Okay.
We'll be doing some summarizing in a couple days with this.
Great.
So just as a final closure for today, because we'll read more of the text tomorrow, both classes, and adding to this chart, life is difficult right now. We can infer that because of all this information. If life starts becoming easier or something else happens, then we'll make a different inference here. But right now, life is difficult for these travelers, for these pioneers. They're wanting to go to Oregon because they've heard life is better. Land there is wonderful. Living is great, better than where they currently live. So that's why they're traveling. So we will end here for right now. You'll need to hang on to your page, your text. Keep it for tomorrow and keep your journal entry, and we'll be continuing tomorrow. So thank you very much, both classes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, fifth graders, go ahead and head back.
We don't have our lawn, so it doesn't matter.